Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we'll be diving back into Numbers because we left off in Numbers. But if you're unaware of what we're doing here, I have a very unconventional Bible study. It is not like anything that you have ever seen, and I suggest you start in Genesis. I'm going to assume if you stay here that you're caught up. Let's dive in and check out Numbers 28 because we left off at Numbers 27 with Yeshua taking control of the Israelites after Moses. He has been stepped up. But now we need to distract from what just happened. We need to break up the narrative a little bit and get a little bit of breathing room before we get to the next set of what's going on. So we're going to get some reiteration here. This is going to be offerings. This is going to be feast days and things of that nature. So it's going to be a little bit boring. It's not going to hurt my feelings if you're not here, but we are going to go through this word for word because that's what we do here. And now we're going to check out Numbers 28, the daily offerings. I have said before, and I will say again, that I think that every single time that there is a blood offering, you are dealing with the wrong entity. That there are several entities at play in the narrative, and that some of them require blood and some of them don't, and some of them want you to kill things and some of them don't. And that if you're dealing with a blood sacrifice, you are dealing with the wrong entity. And then the Lord said to Moses, "Command the Israelites and say to them, see that you present to me at its appointed time the food for my offerings by fire, as a pleasing aroma to me, and tell them that this is the offering made by fire you are to present to the Lord as a regular burnt offering each day. 2 unblemished year-old male lambs. Offer 1 lamb in the morning and the other at twilight, along with 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering, mixed with 1/4 hin of oil from pressed olives. This is a regular burnt offering establishment at Mount Sinai as a pleasing aroma, an offering made by fire to the Lord. The drink offering accompanying each lamb shall be 1/4 hin. Pour out the offering of fermented drink to the Lord in the sanctuary area, and offer the second lamb at twilight, with the same grain offering and drink offering as in the morning. It is an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. The Sabbath offerings. On the Sabbath day, present 2 unblemished year-old male lambs, accompanied by a grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, as well as a drink offering. This is the burnt offering for every Sabbath, in addition to the regular burnt offering and its drink offering. Sorry, y'all, I got allergies and my eye is itching. At the beginning of every month, you are to present to the Lord a burnt offering of 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs a year old, all unblemished, along with 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour, mixed with oil as a grain offering with each bull, 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering with the ram, and 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering with each lamb. This is a burnt offering, a pleasing aroma, an offering made by fire to the Lord. Their drink offering shall be 1/2 hin of wine, each bull, 1/3 hin with the ram, and 1/4 hin with each lamb. This is the monthly burnt offering to be made at each new moon throughout the year. In addition to the regular burnt offering with its drink offering, 1 male goat is to be presented to the Lord as a sin offering. The 14th, the Passover feast. The 14th day of the first month is the Lord's Passover. On the 15th day of this month there shall be a feast. For 7 days unleavened bread is to be eaten. On the first day there is to be a sacred assembly. You must not do any regular work. Present to the Lord an offering made by fire, a burnt offering of 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs a year old, all unblemished. The grain offering shall consist of fine flour mixed with oil. Offer 3/10 of an ephah with each bull, 2/10 of an ephah with the ram, and 1/10 of an ephah with each of the 7 lambs. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering to make atonement for you. You are to present these in addition to the regular morning burnt offering. Offer the same food each day for 7 days as an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. It is to be offered with his drink offering and the regular burnt offering. On the 7th day you shall hold a sacred assembly. You must not do any regular work. On the day of first fruits, when you present an offering of new grain to the Lord during the Feast of Weeks, you are to hold a sacred assembly. You must not do any regular work. Present a burnt offering of 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs, a year old, as a pleasing aroma to the Lord, together with their grain offerings of fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah with each bull, 2/10 of an ephah with the ram, and 1/10 of an ephah with each of the 7 lambs. Include 1 male goat to make atonement for you. Offer them with drink offerings in addition to the regular burnt offering and the grain offering. The animals must be unblemished. So what we have here is a reiteration of the sacrifices. That is partly because as we talked about before, each one of these are a scroll, and they're meant to be read separately, and in case all you have is the book of Numbers. Inside the book of Numbers, you also have this. But it is placed here, specifically, instead of with the last time that we did this, in this same book, so that it breaks up the narrative. There's an atrocity, right? It's a plague. There was a plague. They killed 24,000 people. They all caught a case of iron poisoning. They all got stabbed. And that was the plague. They all got stabbed. And so they had to break that up before we get to the next part. And so they threw this in here. Like, we've been over this in the other books, and it has a place where they could have inserted this earlier. But instead, this breaks up the narrative a little bit, like I'm doing when I'm talking, so that we're not just reading the same information over again. The Feast of Trumpets. On the first day of the 7th month, you are to hold a sacred assembly, and you must not do any regular work. This will be a day for you to sound the trumpets. As a pleasing aroma to the Lord, you are to present a burnt offering of 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs, a year old, all unblemished, together with their grain offerings of fine flour mixed with the oil, 3/10 of an ephah with the bull, 2/10 of an ephah with the ram, and 1/10 of an ephah with each of the 7 male lambs. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering to make atonement for you. These are in addition to the monthly and daily burnt offerings with their prescribed grain offerings and drink offerings. They are a pleasing aroma, an offering made by fire to the Lord. On the 10th day of this 7th month, you are to hold a sacred assembly, and you shall humble yourselves. You must not do any work. Present as a pleasing aroma to the Lord a burnt offering of 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs a year old, all unblemished, together with their grain offerings of fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah with the bull, 2/10 of an ephah with the ram, and 1/10 of an ephah with each of the 7 lambs. Include 1 male goat for a sin offering, in addition to the sin offering of atonement, and the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and drink offerings. On the 15th day of the 7th month, you are to hold a sacred assembly. You must not do any regular work, and you shall observe a feast to the Lord for 7 days. As a pleasing aroma to the Lord, you are to present an offering made by fire, a burnt offering of 13 young bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs a year old, all unblemished, along with the grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, with each of the 13 bulls, 2/10 of an ephah with each of the 2 rams, 1/10 of an ephah with each of the 14 lambs. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 2nd day, you are to present 12 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 male lambs a year old, all unblemished, along with the grain and drink offerings for the bulls, rams, and lambs, according to the numbers prescribed. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 3rd day, you are to present 11 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all unblemished, along with the grain and drink offerings for the bulls, rams, and lambs, according to the number prescribed. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 4th day, you are to present 10 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all unblemished, along with the grain and drink offering for the bulls, rams, and lambs, according to the number prescribed. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 5th day, you are to present 9 bulls. We're going to skip ahead. Every day, it just changes in amount. You are to present these offerings to your Lord in the appointed times in addition to your vow and free will offerings, whether burnt offerings, grain offerings, drink offerings, or peace offerings. And so Moses spoke all this to the Israelites just as the Lord had commanded. And so again, this is a distraction. This is the minutia of the law. This is the excessity of this, right? Do you realize how many animals we are talking about killing right here? Now, some of it may be consumed, but most of it is not to be consumed, right? It is to be burnt. That is a waste on an epic scale, unless there is a very specific reason for it. Now, we have seen already in the book that energy is in the blood, that the blood holds the life, and the blood can fuel things. We have seen that some of these entities require these sacrifices because they very really require the energy that is invested into it. It may not be the blood itself, but it's the act of you sacrificing the blood for them. It is the act of you committing the violence specifically in the worship of them. This is one of those things that steps on toes, right? And I don't mean it that way, but God never required a sacrifice from you. Now, if you want to freely give him a sacrifice, he will, of course, honor and bless that. But it wasn't something that was required for you to do in order to receive his blessings. Like, all you ever had to do was ask for him to forgive you and to do the things he asked you to do, and his blessings flow freely. He doesn't micromanage on the level that we see in these books, right? That is my point. That is one of the things that I am very expressly told to say, right? And it is not an audible voice in my head. It is my conviction striking me. But I know where the source lies, and I know that when I follow it, I get the right blessings come in my life. That is not the worldly blessings that everybody else expects. I know what my God blesses me with. And so, he's not here to micromanage your life in this way. That's why we're doing this Bible study in a large part, is because God doesn't care if you're drinking a little bit, or if you're smoking a little bit, or if you're cussing a little bit. He doesn't. He cares about your service to him, and he cares about your intentions behind it, right? You can do things that are deviant as a straight person, or you can do things that are deviant as a gay person, or you can do things that are not deviant as either one of those. That is a reality that is hard for some people, especially the people who tend to go into Bible studies. God made everyone. He made them exactly as they are. And you do not just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to try and smoke a pole. That is not just something that happens. You don't just randomly get a curious taste in your mouth. That's not a thing. God makes you where you can do that or not, right? So if it ain't you, take it up with him. This micromanaging is not what he is about. He is about you coming to him in willful service. And so we're going to wrap up in 30, because 31 begins the next section of wow. But Numbers 30. And then Moses said to the head of the tribes of Israel, this is what the Lord has commanded. If a man makes a vow to the Lord, or swears an oath to obligate himself by pledge, he must not break his word. He must do everything he has promised. It could have ended right there and been dead on. You should never say that you are going to do something that you don't fully have control of. You should never say that you're going to do something that you do not intend to do. And you should very, 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 very much consider whether or not you should ever say that you're going to do something in the name of the Lord. That is not to say that God does not call people to do things in his name every single day. And that it might be you, it might be me. But you be very careful on claiming that and knowing full well that you will be held responsible for calling upon his name in that way. So if you make a promise in the name of the Lord that you do not intend to keep, I swear to God, I will do whatever it happens to be. And you know you're not going to do that. God is going to take that up with you. That is part of the laws of creation. I've covered that in a different video. But that is energy expended and not it. The return is exactly what you had coming. It just is. And so it could have ended right there, but instead we get into micromanagement again. And if a woman in her father's house during her youth makes a vow to the Lord or obligates herself by a pledge, and her father hears about her vow or pledge but says nothing to her, then all the vows or pledges by which she has bound herself shall stand. But if her father prohibits her on the day he hears about it, then none of the vows or pledges by which she has bound herself shall stand. The Lord will absolve her because her father has prohibited her. All right, so there is levels of responsibility and levels of responsibility. At this point in time, women had no rights. Get that in your head. When I say no rights, I mean they were property expressly for the large part of the entirety of the area at a minimum, but most of the world. Quite literally, could not speak unless told to in many places. Have to dress exactly as instructed in many places. Able to be passed around at the will of the owner. All of these things was absolutely part of life for women in the area at a minimum, but most of the world. There were several pockets of some semi-enlightenment where there was equality. There were some places where there were women in charge, and it was just as bad as some of the other places. But in this particular area, the father is responsible for the woman. But the father is responsible for his children regardless, male or female. This vow and obligation, that is a transferable thing, right? If you allow your children to make promises in the name of the Lord, then you will be held to that. That is true because you are responsible for their care and upkeep. You are responsible for their teaching and instruction. They have been given to you for a time. They've been given into the care of you for a time to guide them and mold them into productive, healthy, happy human beings. And so that's male or female. This particular point in time is raising up one of those levels of knowledge, right? This was giving somewhat a level of autonomy, but not really, to a woman. This was a little bit raising the responsibility, not really, for a woman. Because this is still like heavily restrictive, way beyond what God ever intended for humanity. And I can say that because I have been instructed to. Right? But it comes down to the knowledge, right? So if you don't know that they've made this pledge and they have not reached the age of majority, then those things are not held to account. That is just ways. These women never reach the age of majority, right? For the most part. But it specifies the youth particularly because she is given a little bit right here, right? She's given under authority to either her father or her husband. The knowledge of what your child has done. So you know that your child has made this vow. It is at that point that you are responsible for countermanding that to your child. To expressly let them know at that point that this is not correct. That is the correction that is required. You are the only one that can give that. You are responsible for the care of this child, and you are responsible to ensure the direction of this child and to ensure that they are not doing this thing. Now, you can't be held responsible for it if you don't know about it. But once you know about it, you are held responsible for it. If a woman marries under a vow or rash promise by which she has bound herself, and her husband hears of it but says nothing to her on that day, then the vow or pledges by which she has bound herself shall stand. That's the extent of the autonomy that is given to women, right? They can make this promise, but if he hears about it and does nothing, then it's okay. Like that's the extent of autonomy. That like it's ridiculous to me. Like that is what's being said here. Like this is God's relaying his guidance to them is that women are property. If a woman marries while under a vow or a rash promise by which she has bound herself, and her husband hears of it but says nothing of her to her on that day, then the vow or pledges by which she has bound herself shall stand. But if her husband prohibits it, when he hears of it, he nullifies that vow, and that binds her, or the rash promise she has made, and the Lord will absolve her. Every vow a widow or divorced woman pledges to fulfill is binding on her. If a woman in her husband's house has made a vow, or put herself under an obligation with an oath, and if her husband hears of it but says nothing to her, and does not prohibit her, then all the vows or pledges by which she has bound herself shall stand. But if her husband nullifies them on the day he hears of them, then nothing that came from her lips, whether her vows or pledges, shall stand. Her husband has nullified them, and the Lord will absolve her. Her husband may confirm or nullify any vow or any pledge sworn to deny herself. But if her husband says nothing to her from day to day, and then confirms all the vows and pledges that bind her, he has confirmed them because he said nothing to her on the day he heard about them. But if he nullifies them after he hears of them, then he will bear her iniquity. These are the statutes that the Lord commanded Moses concerning the relationship between man and wife, and between a father and a young daughter still in a home. And that's where we're going to wrap this one up, simply because the next part begins a whole new section. When we get into Numbers 31, we are getting back into combat, and it's going to be a whole different thing going on, and we're going to have a lot to talk about, so we're going to save time for that. This was one of those kind of slow parts, and we're doing it for the record, but there are things to learn from this. We're learning that maybe we don't like the laws that are set down. Like, maybe God could have done better. And you can say what you want about me saying that. Men wrote these books. Men wrote the scrolls before they were written into a book, before they were edited out of a book. Men wrote the scrolls. Men who were creating religions. Back here, right now, they are creating the Levite order. They are literally creating the state of Israel. We are about to watch that unfold in the next book. Like, it started here. They own a good chunk of it already, right? But next up becomes wild. And so we're seeing that unfold. But maybe what we have been taught coming up is not exactly good. Maybe there are things that we have overlooked. That is what I am trying to point out. If this was literally the Word of God, then God could have done better. But this wasn't God writing this. This was men writing this. And they were given, even with the divine inspiration, it comes within the scope of what you know. Like, you couldn't go back to Moses and drive a car up to him and him be able to accurately describe that in text. It wouldn't be able to happen. Like, even considering they had words that were able to do most of the things that are involved with that car. He couldn't describe that. It is outside the level of his understanding. Their level of understanding is really wild. If you look at like we did in Exodus, and when we got the law, and the repercussions of the law, and the sexual laws, and the things that we talked about there, if you look at what was wild and out there, what they came out of, and what the areas around them was, this is a lifting up. It is an easing of restrictions. But it is not by any means perfection, and it was not by any means something that had to divinely happen that way. God could have given us the law clearly, right? It could have been a just law clearly from the start. That was within his scope. If he is setting down, these are my laws, it should not consider somebody getting beat in the head for trivial matters. That's what Jesus came to tell people, right? That's what Jesus' fulfillment of the thing was when Yeshua came and took away the Moses, right? That's what that was, and that's what we'll be getting into Deuteronomy and stuff. But that's being led by Yeshua into the land. But it gets wild there. And that's where we're going to wrap this up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion. I mean, I know this was a boring one, right? This is one of those pace breakers so that you can breathe between one atrocity and another. All I'm trying to do is bring a little bit of enlightenment. All I'm trying to do is ease a little bit of confusion. I'm showing the things that I see that is untenable to me, that God has struck my conscience with. Hey, bro, this is not right. I'm pointing those things out because the only thing that was ever required for you was for you to choose correctly. You get the choice. You don't have to choose correctly. You can choose wrong. You can choose hatefulness. You can choose divisiveness. You can choose prejudice. You can choose all kinds of wrong things. But you're meant to choose right things. And the right things all are summed up in a sentence. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That is in the entirety of the law. Ask for forgiveness, and it is yours. Ask for grace, and you have it. There's no need for an intermediary. There was never a need for a sacrifice. And that's where I'm going to leave that. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. You're perfect. God loves you. You're perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit State. Peace.